Alright, so the next type of equation we're going to be studying is this type here. We started out with that type, and then we had this type, and now we're going to be looking at this type, so you can sort of see we're going around these possibilities counterclockwise. As you can imagine, the next video is going to be about that type, and then the fifth video will be about the hardest of all types. So right now we are talking about logarithmic equations, equations that actually have logarithms in them, where the logarithms appear on only one side of the equation, not both. And immediately you should have a sense of why this is a little tougher, because you won't be able to cancel the logarithm out on both sides, because it won't be on both sides. I mean, that seems pretty obvious once you step back and look at the big picture here. The other thing I want you to remember is, remember this little asterisk here. We just talked about it in the previous video, and what that means is you must check your answers when you're done. It's not optional. Okay, so let's get there. Let's get to answers so that we can talk about checking them. First step is very similar to the type we just did in the previous video. Compress the logarithms. Here, you're only doing that on one side. Oops. I said side, so I wrote side into one logarithm. But it's very similar to what we did before. Here it's a plus, and because it's plus, when you compress, you're going to get a product, log of x minus 9 times x. And it's probably a good idea to actually multiply those two things together. Don't leave them in that factored form. So write this as log of x squared minus 9x. That'll make the next couple of steps easier. And then the next step, it's something that goes back to when I was originally teaching you what logarithms were several sections ago, back in the early parts of chapter 12. There are a lot of different ways to look at it, but the sort of unifying idea that I use is the idea of moving the base to the other side. So that's what we're going to do at this step. Move the base to the other side. Now you can see I'm being a little tricky with you here. What's the base? I didn't write any base at all. So now you got to go back to the section where you talked about doing logarithms on your calculator and remember what those buttons stand for. Logarithm written without a base next to it, that always means that the base is base 10. So here, where I didn't write a logarithm, there was kind of a phantom 10 there the whole time, just kind of unwritten. Sort of like with square roots, you don't put a little 2. If you don't put a little 10, it means base 10. So when we want to move the base to the other side, that means take that 10, move it over to this side. So now the equation is going to be x squared minus 9x equals 10 to the 1. Remember, it was the base of a logarithm. When you move it to the other side, it's still a base, but it's the base of an exponential now. And then, like we did with the previous type of logarithmic equation, continue as normal. Now you'll notice this is also a little trickier than the previous video. Here, continue as normal is a little harder. We have a quadratic rather than a linear equation. Luckily, it does factor into x minus 10 and x plus 1. So you get two answers, x equals 10 and x equals negative 1. The video is not over. We're not done. This is not the end of the video because don't forget, you must check your answer. I scrolled it off the top of the screen, but it's right up there. You must check. So these two answers here, we're going to have to check them. We're going to have to take them back to the original equation, not an equation where we've done any algebraic work at all, but the original, and we're going to have to check each one of them. We're going to have to plug 10 in, see if it works out. We're going to have to plug negative 1 in, see if it works out. So we're going to have to work out log of 10 minus 9 plus log of 10, see whether or not that comes out equal to 1. and log of negative 1 minus 9 plus log of negative 1. Let's see if that comes out equal to 1. Well, the one on the right is absolutely not possible. This part alone, logarithm of a negative, already breaks one of the fundamental rules of logarithms. You can only do a logarithm of positive numbers. So it doesn't really matter what the rest of the problem is doing. This part here is already an automatic failure. This answer does not work. It, quote, fails to check. So that answer's out. Negative 1 is not really an answer. Over here on the left, though, 10 minus 9 is 1. It's a nice positive number. And both of these logarithms are relatively simple ones. Log base anything of 1 is always 0. And log base 10 of 10, remember the bases there match, is 1. And 0 plus 1 is indeed 1. So that check there succeeds, and you don't even really need a calculator to do that check. It's a fairly simple one. So even though the check here has two numbers to check, it's still fairly easy to do. So let me reiterate the steps real quick. Compress into a single logarithm. Move the base to the other side. Continue as normal until you get to answers, but then check your answers. If you don't check your answers, remember, maximum of half credit.